Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking podcast on interior design. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. If, like me, you are curious about how things are done within the industry, want to know how people got their breaks and how they've developed their careers, and get some top tips and advice, then this is the podcast for you. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. Patrick O'Donnell is the international brand ambassador for British paint and wallpaper manufacturer Farrow and Ball. Patrick is responsible for Farrow and Ball's outreach strategy connecting with interior designers across the UK and North America. His role includes colour consultation, curation of colours and promoting products, delivering talks on colour and decoration, and providing logistic support to interior designers. I interviewed Patrick via Zoom in early December 2022. In this episode, we discover the two schools of thought on when to choose colour, how National Trust properties provided the inspiration for their colour collections and the process of introducing new colours to the Farrow and Ball range, why you should ignore the rules and how mistakes make you better, and if you're looking for colour inspiration, you should start walking the streets. I was just thinking, it's great that I came across you, a lot to do with what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 months, which has been renovating my new home. I was delighted to come across your details on the Farrow and Ball website and various other locations where you're giving advice on colour, because that seems to be the only thing we've been doing. Well, one of many things we've been doing is trying to think about colours. And what I'd be interested in is just like why, what your role is at Farrow and Ball and how you got into that, but also what are your thoughts on the power of paint? Because I think it's one of the go-to tools that's kind of underestimated in the interior design world.
Yeah, I mean, my job is sort of fairly broad and across sort of various departments at Farrow and Ball, but it's kind of a slightly strange, sort of fairly ambiguous title. I'm international brand ambassador. So I do a lot of press work. I do color consultancy for press and VIPs. In kind of pre-COVID, I would go and do a lot of public speaking, sort of around Europe and North America and stuff. But obviously, even though we're kind of out of COVID in terms of travel and everything, that hasn't quite gained traction again, yet. I did some guest work I did some stuff in the Netherlands in September, October actually. So that was quite nice to be back out on the road, sharing my passion, Farrow and Ball's passion, with colour. And then I do a lot of social media stuff for Farrow and Ball. And it's kind of varied. And I'm not even quite sure how I kind of fell into it, because I took quite a long time to find my métier, and I'm probably still looking actually. But I've done various things. So I've done specialist painting. I've worked in TV, as an AD, and then in the props department. I worked as a florist in London. I've kind of been a head cook at a deli in London. So anything creative with my hands or with my eyes, I'm probably fairly competent. But yes, it took a while to settle down.
And has colour always been important to you? Yeah,
it has. I think quite subconsciously though. So as a child, I was always sketching, and then I got into interior design, and obviously, when you're scheming, colour, resonates, enormously. It's very much a key part of the scheme. Along with texture and surface and scale and all of those and lighting. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one. I suppose I'm more aware of colour because at Farrow and Ball, my role in terms of design is much more two-dimensional. We as a company, we sell wallpaper and paint, so we're not actually doing design per se. So yes, I'm probably more acutely aware of the level that color can bring. And it's kind of really interesting because I kind of work with a lot of international designers. We kind of talk about color, and there seems to be two schools of thought: that whether color comes in towards the end of a scheme or at the beginning. I mean, I'm probably the believer it comes in at the end, because I have this slightly corny analogy that I think color is like the glue. It kind of coheses everything else, all the other elements in a room. Yeah, because I quite often say to people, when people are asking for color advice, if the room's a little bit miserable and a little bit grim, there's every chance that a color alone won't make it feel better. It's just another color in probably not a very appealing space. But I mean, what I can do or try to do with people is nudge them with little roadmaps, which is technically out of my remit if I'm doing color consultancy. But judicious rehanging of art and repositioning of furniture, and then with a new paint color, can be much more transformative than just painting a room alone. So it's all about context, I think.
It's interesting that you say it's towards the end, because I think that is where color selection is often placed, isn't it? But I always thought that, like most things that are at the end of projects, they should be further towards the front, like specification of furniture and ordering stuff. But
I think that's the funny thing, though, isn't it? Because paint, essentially, it's possibly the cheapest element that goes into a space. So, your investment in furniture and textiles and all of those elements are much pricier. So I think get that right, and then you will find a color that works appropriately with every element you're introducing to the room. It's got to be right, because it's quite often the largest surface area in the space.
Is there an element of needing to see how the space is working before you paint it then?
I think comes in at the end for lots of reasons. Like I said, all the other elements, so, if you're buying, I'm not saying everybody is doing this, but, some of the people I kind of speak to, when you're investing in a sofa that's possibly costing between £8,000 and £12,000, that is essentially much more of a priority than the wall color.
Yeah.
And because there is so much choice out there, you will always find a color that will harmonize or work or gel a scheme, at the end. I mean, we all start with mood boards, don't we? And again, it's what I advise my clients when I'm working with them, is create their own kind of mood board, what they kind of think, what they kind of perceive the end result to be, or even if it's just snatching inspiration from other places. But for me, I would hate to be constrained by the wall color at the beginning. I think, oh God, I've got to work everything around that. Where it's much easier to kind of pull all the other elements in. And I think, again, I'm not talking for everybody's taste at all. Some people like quite sort of simple, sort of fairly monochromatic and neutral schemes. I do not come from the school of simple. I like slightly sort of eclectic, cluttered. It's essentially deeply personal. So interiors are really deep. My interiors are deeply personal to me and my partner who live in the space. It's not an Instagram interior. It's not kind of copying other people. And I think that's really key, isn't it? And I think that's when rooms come alive, when they're personal.
And it's finding the confidence, I suppose, to go for something. I mean, there's so much inspiration, so many ideas out there, but pushing it a little bit further, using colour in a more daring way, I suppose, takes a bit of confidence, doesn't it? Because
especially when you go down darker. I mean, I obviously talk about colour a lot for Farrow and Ball on the social media channel. And I'm often, certainly not bullying or hectoring, but kind of trying to encourage people to be slightly braver with colour, especially the conundrum of the north-facing room, the poorly lit space, because it always feels like a challenge. And I think instinctively you just think, I need to paint it sort of white to make it feel clean and bright, and it ends up being drab and miserable and really, really gloomy and cold. So, actually it makes much more sense to actually play with the limitations and go dark. I mean, I'm in a room which is northwest facing, and it's tiny. It's really, really tiny. And I've just painted it really, really dark green, and I love it. And it really comes into it's really restful in summer, but actually in winter, and on a day like today, what is it? It's early December. It's afternoon. It's grey beyond belief outside. There is no natural light coming here, but it's beautiful. It's really absorbing, and I think artwork always looks so lovely on dark walls. I think it really frames pictures sort of resonate really well on dark backdrops. And I love it, but it's tiny. I'm trying to even think of the dimensions. It's less than 2 meters deep by 3.5 wide, if that. It's really is it's a tiny study, but I don't feel sort of like it's all coming in on me or oppressive in here.
Yeah, there's a nice intensity of when you're using strong colors in small spaces that you get. That
yes, I love it. I mean, I'm paying to all the limitations. One, it's a small room, so yes, I've used a dark color. 2, it's really poorly lit. I've used a dark color. 3, it's got beyond so much furniture in it for the space, which I quite like doing, because I always think actually weirdly it makes a room feel slightly bigger if it's got lots of kind of larger scale stuff in it. But yeah, and you can walk it. You can just about walk in here. You can kind of roughly get through the space.
Yeah, it's so you're breaking all the rules there. Are there rules that we should be
looking? What are rules?
Well, this is my point. I think that one often is so frightened of not getting it right with color. When I think actually there's so many different ways of doing it, and in one single space you could have I believe you could have totally opposing strategies to use of color, both of which could work, depending on context. Yeah,
and I'm not saying going dark is the only cure. I mean, use warm-based colors as well as the other solution for miserably lit rooms, but I just wanted to go dark. I couldn't go yellow or red in here because I've got yellow and red in the rooms on the other side of the house. I had to have a break from that. So.
Yeah. Do you think our little challenge in our house that we're refurbishing at the moment is some sort of I like the sort of conceptual continuity, so that we're dealing with things in the same way in different parts of the houses. Like we've got a lot of exposed beams and certain walls, what you might call feature walls, and where does a feature wall end, and having some sort of consistency, which probably no one is going to notice apart from myself. But it's like there are things that you can use as sort of guides to tackling how to paint and decorate. But again, I don't think there's any set guide, is there? There isn't any rule.
No, there's not, and I think it's really we talked about this. There's so much inspiration out there, whether editorial or online, and it is a really good starting point. So I wasn't trying to be dismissive about having copycat interiors, but the whole fun for me, and you talked about confidence, and yes, it is a confidence thing. I'm willing to make a mistake, and it's good to make mistakes because it kind of makes you better. It kind of makes you understand stuff. And I'm not frantically painting every week or every 6 months because I get bored. I mean, I do kind of try and settle and go, actually, I'm really happy with this, because I don't like decorating. I'm a really bad painter, and you probably can't see up here, but I've got some Grogan ribbon around the top because I couldn't be bothered to paint the ceiling. In here, it's fine. It's a slightly dirty off-white. And I just thought, oh God, the challenge of cutting in, because there's not even like a cornice I could cut into. It's just literally wall hit ceiling. And I'm quite slapdash. So I kind of thought, that's fine. I just buy a 2-inch Grogan tape and I can tape over where I
tape over the cracks. Yeah.
Didn't quite commit to going towards the edge.
Yeah. I think that's another one of the things about painting is the perceived requirement for accuracy. Particularly when more walls meet walls, and cutting in, it's such a task. And we're in this sort of 500-year-old farm cottage, which doesn't have a straight, neat line anywhere. So the cutting in decision is often completely arbitrary, So, but I think
I was going to say that's quite tricky. I did a pub down in, you're Devon, aren't you?
Yes.
Devon?
Yes.
Yeah, I did a pub down in Cornwall, out of the Shire. And it's beautiful. I mean, all kind of line rendered walls, but yeah, not a straight line to be had. So, in a couple of the spaces, actually, we just went for full color immersion and took the strong wall color over the ceiling as well.
Yeah.
Just because it was quite nice. It looked quite nice. It felt quite right. But yes, it made it a lot easier than having a wonky sort of wall line at the top.
That draws your attention to it. Yeah. So just going back to Farrow and Ball, you've been there quite a few years.
I have. Yeah.
Is there anything that attracted you to them as a business? I was doing a bit of research, and I was coming from Devon, delighted to see that they were just over the border in Dorset, so I can feel
We always have been. Yeah. We haven't moved. Well, we have moved in such, but I mean, within kind of 2 or 3 miles from where we originally were. So yeah, we're just outside of Wimborne. And it's really funny. We had a press launch. We launched some new colours in September. We had kind of a press launch down at head office. And I think everybody is really amazed when they visit us, because I think we have quite a strong brand, an international brand. So I think everybody probably thinks we're this enormous behemoth. And actually, when they turn up at the factory, what, it all happens here. We like, yep. What, in these kind of 3 units? Yep. And they're like, how do you do it? I go, I don't know, just got really, really brilliant people in production and logistics. But yeah, it all happens in kind of a few little units on just a little estate outside of Wimborne. It's amazing.
That really does sound. I mean, you have this vision of the brand. I mean, it's such a strong brand, and I think, and I talk to my friends about Farrow and Ball. It's that seems to be the sort of go-to point for color inspiration. Although, actually, some people then go off somewhere else to buy the color, which is another
we can't
story.
Control that.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, but actually, it's a sort of it feels like a benchmark for quality or a certain style.
I think because we want kind of, I suppose, if you're looking at sort of premium paint, we're probably kind of the first kids on the block, or the first kids that people got to hear about, from the early 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously a lot more people creating premium paint now, and doing a really lovely job of it. So, so obviously we can't be complacent. And but yeah, I mean, I think that palette, that kind of muted historical reference point palette, became kind of iconic in the 90s. Yeah, and it's just kind of gained momentum since. And I think because we have quite a strong foothold in North America as well, which is obviously quite a difficult market to break, but we've had presence there for quite a long time, and that has really helped too. And we do kind of really, from a creative point of view, we do really interesting stuff in the States, because you have to kind of slightly shout a little louder, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's so huge.
Are you seen as a sort of quintessentially British brand then? Is that what attracts?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't want to use the word quirky, but I suppose our names will always be fairly notorious for some of our paints. And yeah, I mean, the one thing, not just Farrow and Ball, I mean, the one thing Britain is known for is rather beautiful sort of products with integrity, whether that be in motor cars or in fashion or in jewelry or, design down to paint. So, that soft power of British manufacturing, definitely carries some weight.
I find people who will talk about a colour with almost reverence, how that colour, oh, I love that colour, and it's like, and it will be a colour they'll use in all their houses as they move through their lives, like.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely favourites. I mean, I've definitely got a few that I always go to and never tire of, just because I've used them. So, I've used them on numerous occasions. I know they work in so many different environments, and they create lots of lovely effects. I mean, some of them are really, really nuanced and really change quite dramatically depending on the light or time of day. I kind of love that kind of transitional kind of element you get with some of our colors. It's really nice. It's not like, it's almost like redecorating in a kind of weird way during the course of a day.
Yes, yeah, as the light passes through. And the selection of colours, it's quite I know there's the archive, it's quite a limited palette, isn't it? Which is nice for people like me who want to select, so there's not too much choice.
Yeah, it's I mean, we've kind of stuck with the core as a main collection of 132 colours. And we only, I mentioned obviously earlier, we launched some new colours in September. So every time we launch new colours to keep the 132, we archive. So, I mean, if anybody's ever anxious, actually, the archive are all available. The only problem becomes that we don't sample pot the archive. So from a sampling issue, but we do sell a medium color book with them. They are spray painted. So there's a reference point for all the archive colors. But yeah, it's just a thing, and whether it'll stay like that, we've had 132 colors for quite a long time. So whether that will just keep rolling on as kind of the core palette, we don't know. I mean, there's 125 colors, I think, in the archive. Soon to be more, because we'll be putting the Natural History Museum collection in the new year. So it's a lovely reference point. And between the two, there's really, there's pretty much everything you need. And obviously, you will see if you go to the archive, and you'll see on the main color card, like the popularity of yellows has diminished. I keep banging on about yellows coming back. I love yellow. I think it's really joyful, and used in the right sort of quantity or in the right environment, it's really lovely and optimistic. But our yellow selection in the main collection has just got smaller and smaller and smaller. So there will be a certain level of fashion dictate through the collection.
So, and when you're looking at new colors, what is it that's influencing those decisions for changes?
Well, it's really weird, because I just thought about the fashion of yellow, and it kind of sort of disappearing a little bit from our main collection. But actually, we're not driven by trends or zeitgeist per se, but obviously we have to have some commercial savvy. And actually, this collection was quite interesting this year, because a lot of it, there was a bit of retweaking, and there was also kind of more like color scales of some of our best colors. So rather than having a complete radical overhaul, it was almost kind of revisiting and slotting in some sort of more tonal shades around kind of some of the best sellers. So and that's why we've got 11 this year rather than the usual 9. And that kind of really drove it. And obviously, you need to know that blues are still enormous, greens are really big, and kind of pinks, especially for us, kind of those earthy, more sort of natural pinks rather than anything too sugary. We knew those are kind of still huge popularity. When you look back at our kind of sales of the last 2 years, that's definitely, apart from whites, but we've got over 30 whites. So it's kind of like, how many whites do we need? How many whites do you need? I mean, because that can get overwhelming when you start kind of putting all the white samples together from us and other manufacturers, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know. I'm overthinking everything. And
You've got to
really overwhelming.
Well, we're doing that. We've got a few whites, I must say, dotted around, painted on walls, and really we need to archive, not archive. We need to make a record of which ones they are, because they go on the paint, and you think, oh yeah, I won't forget which one that is, and then there's one next to it which is almost identical, but you're clearly different. And we're talking about nuances of shade and tint here, and it's mind-boggling, because you go around in circles, and something that you think you might have discounted at the start, suddenly after a week or two or even longer, thinks, oh, that looks quite nice. It's like, well, no, which one was that?
Which one was it? I know. Yeah. Now we're going to get them all out again and do patch tests.
Yes. But that is that part of the kind of unique sort of differentiator about that, that there's such a range of very similar colors. Is that part of it, like taking it to a sort of different level in terms of, the options available within?
No, not really. No, if you look at a lot of competition do kind of color scales anyway, and we've never done. So we might have kind of relatable palettes on the color card, but consciously we've never had like a scale of color.
Yeah.
So it just seemed to make natural sense. I mean, actually, and weirdly, a lot of the new colors are a little bit cleaner as well. So all our paint has that little underlying black note through it, which, I'm not saying it makes it drab at all, but it just kind of stops that kind of almost slightly acidic tendency you can often get with paint colors. But some of these are actually a little bit cleaner, a little bit brighter. Everybody thinks we do muddy, moody colors, but we can do jolly too.
Yes. Well, if
you only have to walk around my house and go, oh my God, really? Can do those colors?
Who let that one through? Yeah. But the colors, the traditional other colors, I feel many people think of them as traditional. They come from a palette from about 18th century, 17th century, or what's the origins of the?
Well, it's kind of so. One of the first kind of owners of Farrow and Ball, i.e. when we moved into that kind of commercial period. So, Farrow and Ball been going since the late 1940s. And then a couple called Tom Helm, Martin Efston bought the company in the early 90s. And Tom was at the National Trust. So he had access to this extraordinary archive and obviously the buildings. And, and then he created this beautiful palette with the National Trust from the National Trust building. So that's where the heritage thing came from. We're very fortunate because they're deeply exquisite. They're really, really lovely colors. And I still use a lot of those colors. I was just actually looking through. I found the original color card the other day, and it was 57 originally in 92. 57 colors, and I think there are 24 of those that still exist in 132, in the main palette.
Yeah.
But I found it, and it was such a sort of happy making color card. I mean, it's so beautiful. But yes, even I've forgotten it's only 57. And I remember I used it in my first house, so I obviously had no working relationship with Farrow and Ball, but my first house I bought on the edge of Birmingham in 92 or 93 actually. I remember painting it head to toe in Farrow and Ball. I thought it was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen, because this is kind of absolute concentration of very, very beautiful, well-considered colors. And I painted everything. So I was a fan long before I started working there.
That's amazing. And do you think there's any difference in the way the paints appear when they're in different settings from a more traditional space to a more modern space?
It's really interesting. So when I in my early days here, a lot of people would go, "Oh, we can't use Farrow and Ball in our home because we don't live in a Georgian wreck." Oh God, that's a really weird perception.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, is that because they're talked about as traditional colours, or is that because we show lots of elegant rooms in our marketing collateral with sash windows? And so it's quite interesting to hear that. But no, I mean, you can use oval room blue, lovely Regency blue in a period home. You can use it in a really modern home and put it with a kind of a more sort of contemporary off-white, kind of cleaner greyish white, and it'll feel really, really modern. So no, it's kind of part of our heritage, but it doesn't mean you have to live in a period home or they only work in period properties at all. I mean, I'm living in actually my mother's are in transition. We moved back from Ireland a couple of years ago, and this is kind of classic kind of suburban between the walls family home. It's of no architectural interest or consequence, and in my opinion, all the Farrow and Ball colours look fine in here. They don't look out of place. I don't look like I have aspirations of grandeur or anything.
Yes, you're thinking you're living in some stately home.
Yeah.
But
I did do a break front. I did create a break front pediment on my bedroom door, my humble 1930s bedroom door. I painted the whole door out, extended the width of the architrave with paint, and did a break front pediment on the top of the door. But it was a humorous design nod rather than me pretending I lived in Coke Abbey or something. So
that's brilliant. I have that sort of introducing modern things into old buildings and vice versa, I think is one of the great sort of things you can do and play around with eras.
I think we're far less precious, aren't we, to kind of authenticity or true. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than kind of a wonderful sort of 18th century walnut commode with a wonderful abstract painting over the top of it. That kind of tension between old and new is really, really lovely. I think, we're more relaxed about it now rather than having it has to be totally authentic. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing.
Just talking about how you work with interior designers. As I was talking, I was thinking about, I have a sort of role as an interior designer, I suppose, and I teach interior design. And what are you adding to that discussion about the selection of colours and that they can't do themselves, if you like?
Well, it's not really. The thing is, we've never, as a business, we never had. It wasn't a conscious thing. Just that we were kind of growing the business, kind of looking at how do you expand in different markets and everything like that. So our main driver was commercial growth. And I just kind of thought, oh, look, we don't have, there's no conduit to the design community. within Farrow and Ball. And we're still looking at it as a broader project. So I'm kind of only dealing with the top 100 designers in the UK and also some in the US. And it's just kind of understanding what their needs are and whether we get it right as a brand, and also just showing willing and just sort of being an ally rather than sort of, a company that it doesn't really care and what the design community are doing. So, I'm kind of like a conduit, if that makes sense, more than anything. I'm not telling anybody how to use color, but I will go in and I will do workshops in some of the studios for the more junior designers or interns, and talk about finishes and relevance of finishes and how to deal with color. And I will introduce them to the palette just so they slightly get a better knowledge. So I'm happy to do all of those things, but more often than not, it's just it's a soft touch. The point, if they want to speak to the business, they have me as their reference point, and then I can kind of liaise back to Farrow and Ball and say, look, I spoke to somebody the other day, they thought this would be a really good idea. What do you think? Is this something we could do or not? So it's about being sort of more open and more friendly where possible.
Yeah, and I think that sounds like a really good idea. Is there a sense with paint that people think, I can just choose a paint, myself? And whereas if you were looking at flooring or any other specialist finish, you'd be wanting to speak to the rep, wouldn't you? And saying, make sure I don't make a mistake on the specification of this, But so there's a level of technical support. Is there advice or?
Yes, I mean, there absolutely is. And, even without me, in the mix, you've got our platform showrooms, you've got platform stockists, and they all go through degrees of training. And then you've also got customer services on hand, and live chat. So we are doing all that. That is available, as a free point of access to anybody who wants information about our paint. And it can be problematic, to work out are you using the right finish, especially when, just for example, we've got two eggshells, estate eggshell and modern eggshell. And modern eggshell is tougher and stronger. Essentially, it's strong enough for floor paint, where the estate eggshell is a little bit softer. So we obviously recommend modern eggshell for floors and for kitchen cabinetry and kind of really, really heavy use traffic areas. So it's kind of understanding the difference, just little things like that, which can really help. And we have two emulsions, and one is really beautifully flat, and the other one has a little bit more sheen. It's 7% sheen, but it's fully washable and wipeable. So it's really great. We've got kids and heavy traffic. So it's just making sure that information is readily available rather than sort of stealthily hidden on the website. And people are going, I just painted my whole house and it's marked like fury. And it's like, did you use modern emulsion? No, I use estate emulsion. Then we have to have it. It's not hands up, but it's kind of like we need to be there responsible and supporting the end consumer. There's
more to it than meets the eyes there. In terms of the actual paint themselves, what's the difference? Is there a difference? There's got to be a difference, isn't there, in terms of what it's made up of or how you create it? I don't really know, because I can't really speak for other brands. So I know with premium paint, essentially there's sort of more quantities of resin, there's more pigment in the paint and everything like that. So it's kind of it will be quality of ingredients. So I'm not a scientist. I'm not qualified to kind of talk, and I certainly can't talk about other brands. But yes, it will be made in a different way to the more mainstream products on the market. Well, I had some sort of anecdotal comments about, my builder prefers painting with Dulux, Is there any difference in the way it paints? There shouldn't necessarily be that, or is it just preconceptions that people might have about?
I think there probably are preconceptions. I don't really know why some people don't like us, and that's fine. We can't be all things to all men. I think with water-based paints, especially when you come to wood finishes, the application is different. I think some people still like using oil. I mean, we had, as a business, a conscious decision in 2010 to turn everything to water-based, because at the time there was potentially EU legislation going through to diminish certain chemicals and products within paint, to lower the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds within paint. So we just kind of thought, well, let's get on board with this, and let's get on board with it wholly and do the whole range. And I can probably understand why some, but especially with woodwork, like using an oil-based paint, Yeah, but I mean, the advantage for us is we've had 12 years of developing water-based paint and what it should be like, and kind of, it gets better and better and better at it. So
I think the technology is advancing there. So you've got a more, would you say that's a more sustainable product because of its?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly not perfect. I mean, anybody who says they're perfect, I'm not quite sure how that can be, you know. But we're trying to do our best, and we're always learning, and we're always looking at improvements. So, and it's really exciting. We have new owners as of last year, and they have a huge ethos toward sustainability, and I think that's going to be really interesting how that's brought into our, you know, this particular branch of their business. So I think exciting times ahead for us.
So what's the next thing on your agenda then in terms of your role as a ambassador?
I don't really know. I actually, I'm not quite sure. Hopefully some more travel. I mean, I kind of miss being out on the road. You know, my job isn't, you know, it's not really a desk job. Yes, I need to be here sometimes because I need to do loads of stuff for press, and those short lead articles that sort of come in the morning, go, when's the deadline? Oh, it's this afternoon at 4 p.m. You're like, oh, right, okay. So it's kind of like, great. But yes, I kind of want to be back out on the road a bit more. I'm just trying to think, we've got some exciting stuff happening next year, which I will be part of to a degree. And yeah, I don't really know. I never know. I'm not very good at planning ahead. I'm quite spontaneous. Who knows?
There must be someone looking after that long-term vision, I hope. So when you're going out on the road, what's the message you're trying to push forward?
It's really interesting because I used to hate presenting, and I kind of had to do it. And I always hate it. Even now, I still feel really, really nervous when I have to go and do a talk. But during COVID, obviously, when we're all shut down, our social manager and I just kind of came up with this thing where we did a daily dose of color, and I would kind of go and talk on Instagram. And I think that gave me better confidence, even though I was kind of only talking into my phone and then sending her the video footage. It was fine because I could make a mess and do it again. So it's actually quite funny, and that actually really, really helped my confidence. I mean, when I was in the Netherlands in October, I just standing up. I remember just having the sweats and the shakes, and that's kind of 7 years of doing this, and I still get that terrible, terrible anxiety. But it's just sometimes they're kind of more workshops about how to use paint, color confidence. You know, there'll be death by PowerPoint behind me, but I try and make it much more image heavy. So it's kind of because nobody wants to see bucket loads of script, because that's just, you know, it's perfect kind of sleeping cure. So I try and do it in a really friendly way. I never ever want to hector, you know, and always try and be jolly. And I really, really try not to sound like I'm a product of marketing, if that makes sense. There's nothing. I'm terrible. I'm never scripted. So I'm sure the marketing team always dread it. What's he going to say? And I'm probably make a few faux pas en route, but anyway, it's never intentional. It's just I kind of wing it, but in a good way, in a genuine way. I'm not being disingenuous. I'm not just turning up and talking crap. I am genuinely telling the truth to the best of my knowledge, but occasionally the odd word might slip out that probably shouldn't. I'm quite sort of freeform.
I like the style of that. I think there's a certain amount of adapting to the context, isn't there, of who you're delivering to.
Yeah, and sometimes you're dealing, you know, and it's quite, you know, like I said, I was in the Netherlands, and and the Dutch are amazing because most of them speak English unbelievably, which puts every sort of Brit to shame, or the English to shame. And but you know, you obviously have to kind of temper your language and not use anything too sort of flowery, which is another thing I can do. I can be flowery and verbose. But you know, probably slow your pace down a little bit. You know, and you're kind of looking around the room going, am I losing anybody? But I always say at the beginning of a chat, please throw anything at me if you're not keeping up or you don't understand everything I'm saying. Yeah, it's really lovely. And I love that whole banter when you're out on the road. So once I get over my initial nerve thing, which lasts about 10 minutes, I love that to and fro you get with the crowd, because they get really excited. You know, not about me, but they're really, people are genuinely interested to talk about color, talk about decorating, talk about style, talk about ideas and stuff. And actually, weirdly, the British look, even though it's not necessarily a Dutch thing, but the British look does translate, or travels quite well globally, or it's very well known, kind of that layered, that comfy, that relaxing look. I mean, the Americans are quite fascinated by it when I'm over there, because they kind of do some of that British country look, but it's much tidier.
Yes.
There's not a cushion at a place, there's not a seat sat on. There's no dog hair anywhere. So,
where do you go to? Well, I suppose we're all living the British look, aren't we? Where do you go to find that inspiration, and where does it come from originally?
Well, me or for the brand?
Well, a bit of both, I suppose. The brand initially, but also where do you look for your inspiration?
Well, obviously, going back to that reference about Tom, one of our first owners, in the early 90s, with his relationship with the National Trust, I suppose that was very much probably a thing for us at the time. But we have the most amazing creative director called Charlie Cosby, who is fantastic. She has this really vibrant vision of the brand, so she steers it, of where we're looking, how we look and feel. So I think it's bolder, it's more modern, it's more contemporary, it's more universal. It probably feels more egalitarian because we're not just shooting in Georgian rectorate anymore.
Yeah.
So Charlie will drive it. I will feed in some stuff that I see when I'm out at design fairs, at Salone or Deco off in Paris or in the US at any design fair. And I have, my taste is quite particular. I'm always influenced. I read editorial. I also read World of Interiors. I always read House and Garden, get AD online. And just talking to other people and seeing other people and seeing what other designers are doing. It's a really, really good time for interior decorating at the moment. Some really, really strong visionary people coming through. Some really exciting people who are, you're kind of creating a unique language. And that's really exciting to see that happening. There's so much information around us. It can be information overload. But even for me, just going back to, again, visiting places through the National Trust membership or Historic Housing Association, and just walking the street. And like, if you go to London, I certainly don't want this to be a London-centric conversation. I don't live near London. But sometimes you feel this sort of vitality. And I was in Birmingham the other day, and I was kind of in an area called Digbeth, Cheapside. Again, it just felt really exciting, really vibrant, lots of art happening, lots of young creators doing really amazing things. And that gets you all buzzy. And even fashion as well. Fashion, I kind of pulled a lot of influence from and see what's happening in terms of color and cut and shape and everything. So, I kind of pull style from everywhere, as I'm sure Charlie, our creative director, does too.
I think it's all out there for to be drawn in, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And there's so much online as well, So, yes, the world is your oyster.
Yeah. Just in terms of how you're using paint in spaces, what's the balance between what you might call a more compositional approach, of how color works in the physical space and how it works with the light and how it impacts on mood and atmosphere or, psychologically? Are you thinking about that at the same time as... Sometimes.
And I've talked at a really light point about color psychology and mood, but talk about positive energies of yellow and stuff and how it makes you feel sort of joyous. And obviously every positive energy, there's a negative energy to a color, but if that's not your thing, then all of that is a load of nonsense. But it's quite funny, I got absolutely heckled online because I was talking about, in my bedroom, I was doing a video in my bedroom for Farrow and Ball about not painting your bedroom yellow. I actually don't see the yellow. I don't see my bedroom as being yellow. It's much browner and more kind of caramel. So I suppose, but if you want to kind of just talk about a generic color family, then I suppose people might resonate it as yellow, but I don't. And it actually goes much more blush apricot when the light hits it. And I just got absolutely people just putting hilarious, smiling, watering eye emojis going, you're talking about not painting a yellow bedroom in a yellow bedroom.
This is getting heckled online. So
getting heckled online. It's a real
noise. Yeah,
it's very funny. It was really hilarious because the kind of joke ran for quite a while. I do try I think lighting more rather than mood. And yes, you do create mood with color rather than the mood it naturally brings. there's a thing about, sort of soft mid greens, really relaxing, very good for the soul, very restful. I haven't used that anywhere in the house. Yellow, engaging, and it's energizing and bright and vital and everything. And I've used it in my bedroom, which is the place where you want to switch off at the end of the day. So I'm probably the worst person to ask.
I suppose that's very subjective then, isn't it?
It really is.
What type of space you want to create, the colors there to be able to help you do that.
Yeah, and sometimes people find it really, really hard. I remember working with a client, and one thing in her email was, "I hate blue." It's kind of, okay, it's kind of a blanket hate, because it's a big family. I went to a house, I literally just avoided bringing any blues into the mix, and then she just pulled my color chart, my color book out. I went, "Why are you not showing me any of those?" And I went, "What, the blues?" "They're not blue." "Well, they are, but we can have a look at them. It's just your email said you don't like blue." And anyway, so some you win, some you lose, and you just roll with it.
Yeah, that description of colors is quite interesting, isn't it?
Yes, because when people go, "I have a biscuit carpet," it's like, is that a nice biscuit? Is it a well-toasted digestive? What is it?
Could be a bourbon.
Is it a coconut crumble? It's kind of like, I don't know what that means anymore. So
yeah. Well, isn't that part of the point with the naming? Well, it could be the naming of the colors, that they don't necessarily relate to, well, sometimes.
We've got, there's a color in ours, Hardwick white, which obviously really confuses everything. It's kind of a greenish gray.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that actually. When I look at that, I misread it as being Herdwick white, which
those are the lovely sheep up in the lake.
Yeah, from the Cumbria where I'm from. So that's my sort of visual dyslexia coming on there. I'm thinking, it doesn't even look like a sheep color.
I watched a program on, it was part of a program about Herdwick sheep. They're really beautiful, aren't they? Digressing somewhat.
Majestic beasts, yes.
Yeah, really beautiful sheep.
Back in the early days when I was working with my sister in our design company, we used to choose the colours based on the names, because the names often would resonate more than the colour.
Yeah,
which I don't think is quite the right way to do things. But
no, it's not. It's like my father always used to bet on racehorses. It didn't really matter about their form, but if they had a name that was kind of relevant to either family or resonated with the relation, he would put money on it. And no wonder he lost a bloody fortune on the horse.
Thank God.
I think they're meant to look at the form, Dad.
Yes. Well, I think we'd already got down to almost the colour choice, and if it had a resonating name, that would seal the deal. I think that was our approach.
Right, okay.
So it wasn't quite as random as that, but who comes up with the names then?
So obviously some are reference points from historic homes. Joa, who is our colour curator, she works with Charlie, our head of creative, and so they always or have for a long, long time worked on the new colours. So they will sit down and they will play, and then they will kind of find a shade and then go off and create some wonderful narrative about it. And they all have legitimate threads, so it's not just random plucking. That sometimes it will be a time and place that will inspire a new colour. Like we've got a colour called Stooky Blue or Stiffky Blue, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Which is Joa going on holiday in Norfolk to Stooky, and that lovely sort of slicky, sort of blacky blue brown mud you get, when it tides out.
Yeah.
So there are moments like that. So they're kind of nostalgic as well as kind of relevant to a place.
I think that all adds to the sort of idiosyncrasy.
Well, it makes life very easy for marketing, doesn't it? Because you've got a nice story to tell.
Yeah.
Narrative always goes down well.
Yeah. Beats the kind of 6-digit number approach.
Magnolia.
Apple white, yes. It's fascinating. The I think colour, that paint particularly, I think is one of those things which it's a great way of, without too much risk or expense, of trying something new in a space, which is
because the worst. If you're decorating yourself, and one, getting a decorator in is expensive. So paint in itself isn't necessarily expensive, but the labour costs are really expensive. If you're doing it yourself, then obviously time cost is, it's a lot of time, isn't it? I know it's, if you're doing, that's why I do such a shoddy job, because I really cannot be asked to do really good prep, which I know I shouldn't be saying. That's totally unprofessional of me. God, sanding is the most tedious thing in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, worst case, if you are doing it yourself, then it's an easier thing to fix, with more paint. But, I think the trick is just to, always consider the room as a sum of many parts. Like that's why I said, quite often colour for me and a lot of people I speak to comes at the end. And I do think mood boarding is really, really is a really good thing. Most people will supply samples. I think quite a few companies are obviously charging for sampling now, aren't they? Much more to cover costs. But kind of bring in all the elements, all the different fabrics. I think you bring in the flooring, tiles, if it's a bathroom. What are the fittings? Is it using chrome, using brass, your light switches and stuff like that. So bring in as many elements as you can get your hand on to see how it's all coming together. That will give you a really, really good starting point. And it's really interesting. I don't know if you're finding this with your house that you and your white partner are doing. I mean, because I know a lot of people quite like the idea of flow through a home, and I've got much more of an abstract flow, so I'm using a lot of colours of similar weight.
Yeah.
But I've got dark green, I've got dark red, I've got sort of deepish, sort of caramelly ochre. So I'm using quite a lot of strong colours. Sounds horrendous, doesn't it? But it actually looks all right in the flesh. But yes, some people kind of want flow, don't they, through a place. A really good place to get that is, and your contractors will love you if you're employing somebody, is having one white throughout.
That's what we've got upstairs.
Right.
Too white, it's getting a bit...
Even if it's on your woodwork, like you universal white on your woodwork, and then just bring in elements to the walls and stuff.
Well, I've got this... This is going to be very boring for our podcast listeners, but in the background here, we've got one wall that runs the length of the building, which I've I put the same colour through each room. So there's a bit of continuity.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's all white. Everything's white. It's just to give, like, the light's coming in quite low because we're in a thatched property.
Jonathan, how do I persuade you to use colour?
Well, you'll see. All will be revealed.
Right, okay, fair enough.
You need to speak to the project manager, which is Monica. But I'm pushing for colour downstairs. You see, we've got an end wall. I want to get one of those pinks in there, and we are using. Is it breakfast room green?
Yeah, which is lovely. Yeah, really lovely.
Kitchen diner. So that's going to be a feature.
Interior should be deeply personal. There's nothing worse, than going to homogenous space that when you kind of go, I know nothing about the person that lives in this room. Every room should tell a story, about you, about the way you live, about your life, your interests, your loves, and it should tell a story.
I'd like to thank Patrick for taking the time to speak to me. It's really fascinating to hear his approach on colour, and in particular how he sees it fitting into the timeline of developing a scheme, focusing on creating a mood and atmosphere that represents the personality of the users. It's a really important aspect. And I really like his attitude to bending the rules, testing out unconventional combinations that really reflects his personality and character, and gives inspiration for decorators and interior designers to be a bit more experimental with their use of colour. There's some great resources on the Farrow and Ball website and their social media. I'll put some links in the show notes. The resources have been really useful in my own renovation project. I'll be dropping a few pictures of the results over the next few months on Instagram, and you can judge whether Patrick's desire to see me use more colour has been fulfilled. We've managed a little bit here and there. I'd like to thank Dave Clark from I Am The How for production support and invaluable advice in the setting up of this podcast. Kay Hansen for her planning support and co-hosting role for these and our educational podcasts at the University of Plymouth. And Mark Frith for the music. I'd really like to hear your feedback on the podcast. Leave a comment or get in touch via the website or on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Thank you.